I came home expecting to step back into my life, but instead I found it already being torn apart. The building was wrapped in scaffolding like a cage, and pieces of my studio were sitting in a dumpster on the street. My mother told me it was no big deal, that I could paint anywhere. I smiled, because in that moment I realized something they did not. And when I started to explain it, everything fell apart. My name is Addison. I am 31, and for most of my adult life I lived and worked in a third-floor loft inside an old factory building. It was not glamorous. It smelled like rust after rain and the floors creaked with every step, but it was mine. My grandfather left it to me, and that mattered more than anything money could measure. He was the one who raised me when my parents were too busy chasing their own lives. He taught me how to stretch canvas until it felt alive under my fingers. He showed me how silence could carry more power than shouting. That studio was not just a place to work. It was where I learned who I was, and it held every version of me that ever existed. In my family, things were never equal. My younger brother Ethan was always the golden one, the future everyone talked about like it was guaranteed. Every new idea he had was treated like a breakthrough waiting to happen. I was different. I was the artistic one, the unpredictable one. My success was always treated like luck, never something stable or worth investing in. For years, I played my role. I worked, I earned, and I helped when they needed me. I kept things peaceful by not asking for too much. That was the unspoken deal. I stayed useful, and in return I was tolerated. It was not love, but it was something I had learned to live with. Then I went to Berlin for an art residency, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. No one called me to fix their problems. No one questioned whether my work was practical. I painted until my hands hurt and my chest felt open in a way I had never experienced before. I started a series about family, about inheritance, about what it feels like to only matter when you are convenient. I came back full of hope, carrying sketches and ideas, ready to finish everything in the light of my studio. But the moment the taxi turned onto my street, something felt wrong. The building looked like it was being dismantled piece by piece. Workers moved in and out like they owned the place, and debris was scattered everywhere like broken memories. When I stepped inside, the hallway looked stripped bare. My heart started pounding as I found a foreman and told him my unit number. He checked his tablet and casually told me the space had been sold and was already under renovation. My belongings had been moved to storage. New owners had started demolition the day before. I stood there trying to process what he said, but my phone buzzed before I could even react. It was my mother. Her message was cold and dismissive. She said they had made a business decision and that Ethan needed funding for his startup. She ended it by saying I could paint anywhere, like my entire life could be replaced with a different room. I called immediately, hoping there was some kind of mistake. My father answered, calm as ever, like nothing unusual had happened. When I asked if they had sold my studio, he did not deny it. He framed it as an investment for the family. When I said it was really for Ethan, his tone sharpened, but he did not argue. My mother joined the call and told me I was overreacting. She said I would be fine because I always was. In the background, I could hear Ethan laughing about something unrelated, and that sound cut deeper than anything else. When he finally got on the phone, he spoke like he was pitching a deal, explaining that he needed liquidity and timing mattered. I hung up without saying anything else. That night, I did not cry. I felt something colder take over, something steady and focused. Instead of breaking down, I called a lawyer named Claire, someone I had met through a collector. She was direct and practical, and she told me to send her everything and not speak to my family again without her. The next morning, sitting in her office, I watched her read through the documents with careful attention. After a long silence, she told me there was a problem with the sale. Not a small one, but something fundamental. She explained that my grandfather had set up the property in a way that split ownership between the building itself and the interior of my unit. That meant my parents had sold something they did not fully own. The shell of the building could be transferred, but the interior space, the actual studio I built my life in, legally belonged to me. Without my consent, that part of the sale was invalid. My name had been forged on the documents, and there was even a letter describing me as unstable to justify their control. Hearing that felt worse than the theft itself. They had not just taken something from me. They had tried to rewrite who I was to make it easier to take it. Claire immediately filed an emergency motion to stop the demolition and notify the new owners that they were destroying property they did not legally possess. Within days, my parents showed up at my temporary apartment. They acted like they were there to fix a misunderstanding, not confess to a betrayal. My mother said we needed to talk like adults. I told them plainly that they had forged my signature. My father looked uneasy, but my mother did not hesitate to admit they did what they thought was necessary. Ethan became impatient, saying the legal action was affecting his investors and his funding timeline. He talked about his future like it mattered more than everything else. When I pointed out that my life had been reduced to rubble, he told me to stop being emotional. That was when something inside me finally snapped into clarity. We met at the building a few days later, under the gray sky and the rattling scaffolding. My mother repeated her line again, insisting I could paint anywhere. This time, I smiled for real. Ethan noticed and demanded to know what was funny. I started to explain that the studio they sold was not actually theirs to sell, and Claire stepped in to finish the sentence. When she laid out the legal reality, everything changed. My parents went from confident to furious in seconds. Ethan panicked, demanding I fix it like I always had before. My mother accused me of being selfish and jealous, but I said nothing. I let their words hang in the air while everyone around us watched the truth unfold. The court case moved quickly after that. The stop work order was granted, and the sale was partially undone. The investigation into the forged documents created consequences none of them had expected. Ethan lost his investors, and my parents were forced to face the reality of what they had done. Weeks later, I walked back into my studio. It was damaged and stripped, but the light still came through the windows exactly the same way my grandfather used to chase. I stood there, expecting to feel broken, but instead I felt something stronger. They had not destroyed my life. They had only exposed the illusion I had been living in. I picked up a piece of charcoal and drew the first line on a bare wall. It was steady and certain, just like I felt in that moment. For the first time, I was not creating to prove my worth to anyone else. I was creating because it was mine, and I finally understood something that changed everything. The moment you stop being useful to people who treat you like a resource, you do not lose your place, you find yourself.